My bill, the Detain and Deport Illegal Aliens Who Assault Cops Act, sends a simple but clear message. If an illegal alien assaults our law enforcement officers, they will be detained and they will be deported. This is because these actions must have consequences. Now that seems like a pretty common sense life lesson that most of us learn at a very early age. But it is a lesson, unfortunately, that President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas apparently never have learned. The Biden administration's policies are reckless. Those policies are dangerous. And these policies have very real life consequences, particularly for American law enforcement.
Supposedly, this bill would subject any undocumented immigrant to mandatory immigration detention if they commit an assault on a law enforcement officer. To be clear, that is already current law. But this bill goes far beyond that. It would subject even those individuals with lawful statuses, like DACA and temporary protected status, to mandatory detention if they are merely arrested or charged with assault on a law enforcement officer. There are no provisions to protect those who are mistakenly arrested and are released without charges. Let's be clear, violence is never the answer and should never be used in a political protest. It was wrong for people to assault the police right here in the United States Capitol on January 6th. Just as it is wrong for people to assault the police or anyone else during any protest, regardless of their politics. That is why U.S. law already makes assault a crime, and admitting to or being convicted of a serious assault on a law enforcement officer already results in immigration consequences under current law, including mandatory detention and deportation. This bill doesn't change that. Doesn't make anybody safer, doesn't fix any problems in the immigration system. Instead, this legislation deems everyone guilty until proven innocent. It serves only to further the Republican agenda to fear-monger about immigrants and keep immigration in the news during an election year, while at the same time bankrolling the private for-profit prison companies. The definition of assault varies widely from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Nevertheless, this bill adopts the definition of assault used in the local jurisdiction to subject somebody to mandatory detention. That means that conduct that people would not normally think of as an assault, like lightly touching an officer, could result in an arrest and mandatory detention. Furthermore, people are mistakenly arrested for assault on a police officer far more often than we would like to admit. When this bill was introduced, it was clearly in response to an incident earlier this year in which some recently arrived migrants allegedly assaulted a group of law enforcement officers in Times Square. That incident sparked outrage across the country. But our Republican colleagues directed much of their ire on one particular individual who flipped off TV cameras as he left his arraignment. The image was plastered all over Fox News and was promoted by former President Trump as a symbol of everything that's wrong with the Biden administration's approach to immigration. There was only one problem, Mr. Chairman. As it turns out, that specific individual, who everyone was so quick to demonize and attack, had the charges dropped against him. Despite being arrested and initially charged, he was not even present when this crime occurred. We also see this in protests, where one person gets unruly and the police arrest everyone in the crowd. This bill is going nowhere fast, just like the very similar bill that House Republicans passed last police week. The American people aren't stupid. They see what House Republicans are doing. They want meaningful reforms to the system, and they know that bills like this would do absolutely nothing towards that end. House Republicans refuse to negotiate on immigration, and they fail to do anything that would actually solve some of these problems we face, only to turn around and complain when those problems get worse. This is political theater at its worst, and I urge all of my colleagues to join with me to oppose this legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Washington reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me say I agree with my colleague on the other side of the aisle on one thing. One, the American people are not stupid. The American people know, see, hear, and feel what's going on around them. The American people know that their streets aren't as safe. The American people who live in certain cities know that their kids are being moved out of their schools so that we can house illegals. The American people know that they're paying lots of taxes, and they're paying taxes in so many ways to pay for transportation, to pay for housing, to pay for legal care, to pay for bank cards, to pay for all kinds of services to illegals, and including in some cases education subsidies. The American people are not stupid, and they're tired of it. And they're really tired of individuals who come from other countries illegally. And let me be clear, because I never want this to be morphed into anything else. We love in America legal immigration. Some of our best citizens are legal immigrants. It's illegal immigration that creates this problem. Immigration is about coming here, loving this country, pledging to the flag, loving America. Now, if you asked in my world what it would be, if you break the law and you come here illegally, you should be detained and you should be sent back, period. You don't even have to assault anybody.
Mr. Chairman, assaulting a law enforcement officer is a serious offense that deserves both criminal and immigration consequences. That is why serious assaults on law enforcement officers are already immigration violations that require detention and deportation. The bill before us today would do absolutely nothing to change that. This legislation instead would dramatically expand the type of conduct that would subject somebody to mandatory detention to include people who may not have even committed a crime at all. That is not a good use of our limited law enforcement resources. Instead of wasting our time on these bills that do nothing to fix our immigration system and stand no chance of becoming law, we should be talking about how to create a workable immigration system that allows Americans to reunite with their family and allows American businesses and universities to attract the best and the brightest, essentially creating a workable process so that people wouldn't be forced to go to the border as the only way to come to the United States. We should be talking about the fact that immigrants are good for the country and good for our economy. 1 in 4 American doctors were born abroad, and roughly 45% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or the children of immigrants. 70% of agricultural workers are immigrants. Immigrants feed us, heal us, and help ensure that this country remains an economic powerhouse. We could be embracing the positive impacts of immigrants rather than demonizing them. The Congressional Budget Office recently announced that new immigrants will add $1 trillion in previously unexpected revenue to our country's GDP between 2023 and 2024. Similarly, the Department of Health and Human Services found that over a 15-year period, asylees and refugees contributed nearly $124 billion more in revenue than they received in services from the government. Documented and undocumented immigrants pay tens of billions of dollars in taxes each year. But instead, the majority insists on scapegoating and fear-mongering immigrants. It is true that the immigration system has deep problems, but they cannot be solved through an enforcement-only approach. We have been trying that approach for 30 years, and it has failed. The truth is that the immigration system is all connected. People are coming to the border because the legal immigration system has not been updated in over 30 years, and they cannot find any other pathway to come in. The majority often talks about legal immigrants. Well, let me tell you that the wait time for some permanent residents to bring their families into this country is over a century long. A century for legal permanent residents to bring their family members into the country. Employers are begging us to modernize the employment-based immigration system because the limits on high-tech visas were set when floppy disks were the height of technology, and these companies cannot hire the people that they need. And the small number of immigration judges that we have are absolutely crushed under a massive backlog of asylum cases so extensive that it is now taking people over 8 years to get even a hearing. Why doesn't the majority just help us put more money into immigration judges so we can resolve that backlog? Why not open legal pathways for people who are trying to come here legally? I know this, Mr. Chairman, because I came here and it took me 17 years to navigate the immigration system and become a U.S. citizen, but that was several decades ago. Now you can't even get through the process. I hope that one day we can get back to actually governing, to passing real bills that can make a difference in the lives of the American people. But I fear, Mr. Chairman, that today is not that day. I urge members to oppose this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.